All right, we're back on Writer's Voices with Monica and Caroline. I'm your host, Monica Hadley, and with me again, my mother, Caroline Kilborn. And our next book is kind of on a similar theme. We're talking geography. Yeah,
it's an amazing book. It truly is.
Who do we have with us?
We have Huw Lewis-Jones, and he's going to be talking to us. But there was another person involved in this, and it was Carrie Herbert,
which is his wife.
Okay, so this book is, as I say, is amazing. There's so many illustrations in it, and I'm just very curious as to how you found all these.
It's called Explorers Sketchbooks: The Art of Discovery and Adventure. So, Huw, are you an explorer?
No, absolutely not.
Well, then
you could have fooled me.
Yeah, what inspired you to write this book?
Oh, I should just say I'm so sorry that my wife's not able to join us. She's the co-author of this book, and her late father was a true explorer, a man called Sir Wally Herbert. I'm a polar guide. I'm a historian. I've always enjoyed these kind of tales of explorers. So that was one of the major motivations in creating a book like this. The other is just really to have the chance of sharing some stories of people who we actually don't know a great deal about. And opening Explorers Sketchbooks allows us to jump into these, right into the heart of some great adventures.
Well, I would say as a polar guide, that's pretty adventurous to me.
Okay, well, I mean, I think for those true explorers, the explorer is kind of a precious term, if you like. There's plenty of adventurers these days doing all things and calling it exploration. But all of the men and women in this book, I think of as true explorers. But there's a whole range of people, of course, men and women, as I've said, polar explorers, jungle explorers, botanists, anthropologists, travelers, writers, scientists, all manner of people, going out into the world with open eyes.
And this book is just full of illustrations right from the Explorer sketchbooks. So you do write about them, but the bulk of the book is really is the explorer's own words or images.
That's right. It's kind of a tricky book maybe to explain on radio because it's very, very visual. It's really a big coffee table book. A friend's joke that I'm always making these books that people like to put their feet up on. that deserve to be out and displayed and enjoyed and returned to. In actual fact, I'm a museum curator as much as a writer or historian, and to create a book like this was a chance of making an exhibition that you really couldn't do in a real museum, if you like, because these artifacts, these journals and sketchbooks are spread all over the world and in very obscure collections, often family collections, private archives. And so bringing them together in a book was, yes, a chance to tell a story, but also just a chance to really enjoy some beautiful images.
Well, I imagine it was quite a challenge to get all these, to find out where all these were, and.
Well, that's part of it. Exploration almost in and of itself, a bit like a treasure hunt, I guess.
Yeah.
I've written a whole load of exploration books, so I kind of knew where to begin. I had, a working list of explorers that I admired, but like anything, and I say this a lot to people, to students too, is the more you read, the more you realize that you need to read more books, the less you know. And it's the same a little with this book. We started off with a whole bunch of figures that we wanted to learn more about, but then at each step of the process we were finding new figures and new individuals and new archives, and it's almost endless. So the challenge really is to decide what to leave out. Then.
Do you have enough material for another book?
Oh, there's another 5, 6, 7 books, I think. Not necessarily on this kind of theme. I'm a visual historian, so I write books about exploration history, but it was really absolutely our intention with this book to be able to jump all over the place in terms of over time and space. So you can flick through this book and join explorers, deep in dense jungles. Turn a page, you're out on an iceberg. Turn another page, you're climbing Everest. Another page, you're discovering a new type of beetle or bug. Turn another page and you're down to the bottom of the sea floor, or another, and you're again back to the jungles and finding new kinds of wildlife. So, I mean, that was the joy of it really for me, is to try and take us on all sorts of curious journeys through the journals that survive these explorers.
Now, let's talk a little bit about the organization of the book, because, you could have organized chronologically, you could have organized by type of exploration, Arctic versus jungle, or by continent, but instead you did it alphabetically by the name of...
Sounds a bit sort of straightforward, that, doesn't it? It's peculiar. When you start any book, I mean, the big challenge is trying to wrestle all of the possibilities into something that's manageable. How to, eat an elephant. You've got to start with small mouthfuls. I would never eat an elephant, I should say. Point is this: you have to try and make massive information manageable. So there's 500 years worth of exploration history. How to arrange it? We could have done it by region, I guess. The polar region, the jungles, the deserts, and the mountains. And I have arranged other books a bit like that. But one of the challenges with doing that is that there are so many explorers who actually travel all over the place. So where do you put someone like Captain Cook, who, famously crosses the Antarctic Circle for the first time, but it was also probably more well-known for his discoveries in the Pacific, or other explorers who both climb mountains and cross continents, or spend time in deep jungles on one continent and then explore deserts on another. So we quickly decided against that. Alphabetic was the way to do it in my mind, because it forces some kind of structure on you that makes it easy to follow, but at the same time you get these really lovely, I would say, sort of serendipitous contrasts between explorers. So as I said, one minute you could be, sitting with Charles Darwin in his study, turn a few pages and you're climbing Everest, turn a few more pages and you jump back 300 years and you're looking for plant species in a jungle, turn another page and you're back out on the ice or up a mountain. So for me, that serendipity, that back and forth, enabled kind of interesting contrasts in content, weird juxtapositions actually, but I think can help us find some similarities and shared moments across the ages. What is it that makes an explorer? What did these men and women have in common, if anything at all, and what might their stories tell us today?
But sprinkled throughout, there's a handful that are not in alphabetical order, and it looks to me like those are the still living explorers.
That's right. I mean, I'm pleased. It sounds like you've read this book. It's a forensic analysis.
Yes.
Out of a book. I tell you what. One of the reasons for this was, as a historian, one of the frustrations you find, I suppose in some ways it makes life easy sometimes, is that you can never meet and talk to the people you're writing about. That goes with the territory, being a historian. However, with exploration, there are many men and women who are working today who I still think of as explorers, and so the book has this A to Z of great names from the past, but sprinkled within it, we're better to learn about exploration from explorers themselves who are with us, and so we have essays sown throughout by people who are doing interesting things. I think of Wade Davis, a pretty well-known Amazonian ethnobotanist. We've got the world's leading penguin expert, a traveling artist, even an astronaut, Alan Bean, one of the amazing moonwalkers in the Apollo missions, an artist too. So to have someone like Alan writing for this book and sharing some of his experiences, some of the wonders that he's seen, and then has translated into artworks, that was, just what a privilege to be able to talk to someone like that. So he's wedged in the book between Alexander von Humboldt, a very well-known Prussian jungle explorer, geographer, and Meriwether Lewis, probably, I don't know, arguably one of the most famous American explorers, Lewis
Absolutely,
and Clark.
Yes.
Journey up the Missouri River in 1804-05, which of course is taught in your schools, I guess, I hope.
Yes,
I
it
hope
is.
so.
Or
Yeah,
at least
I
it
hope
was
so,
back when we were in school, but who knows now?
Yeah, who knows?
Well, but that's another kind of interesting thing. Each country has its own heroes or its explorers. In Britain, it's the likes of sort of Captain Cook or Captain Scott, a polar explorer, whereas I guess in America, if you asked anyone to name an explorer, perhaps today they'd name Shackleton, if anyone at all. So, and I should say all of these explorers are in the book and more. So that's one of the real interests. The other, of course, as you said, right at the top of the piece is my co-author, my wife, very lucky to say, Kari Herbert, and her late father, Sir Wally, was a polar explorer in the sort of traditional mould. He charted, many thousand square miles in Antarctica as a surveyor. He made a great journey across the Arctic Ocean in the 1960s with just sledges, fur clothes and dogs, a journey really in the spirit of those made in the past, the first time and the only time that anyone has crossed from Alaska through the North Pole all the way across the Arctic Ocean to Spitsbergen. An amazing journey. This was in the 60s. And so, to have him as a father-in-law, as mother, clearly it was always going to be the case that we write books about explorers of the past, I suppose.
You're listening to Writers' Voices with Monica and Caroline, and our guest today is Huw Lewis-Jones, co-author with his wife Kari Herbert of Explorers, Sketchbooks, The Art of Discovery and Adventure. Now, one thing I've certainly noticed is that almost all of these sketchbooks are truly sketchbooks. They are drawings, they're paintings, they're...
and some of them beautiful.
Some of them quite well done. Is it a job requirement of an explorer to be a good artist?
There are lots of things, I think, on the job requirement. You've got to be stubborn, you've got to be curious, you've got to be flexible. Most of these explorers, yes, they were pretty talented artists, because if you think... long before film and long before photography and kind of modern day means of recording the world, these explorers, if they're going into an unknown place or a little known place, really their journals, their sketchbooks, the images that they can create are the ways and means of recording their achievements. How else can they prove it back at home, these wonderful things that they've seen and done, if they're unable to accurately record these things in their journals? Many of these explorers, I mentioned Captain Cook, he takes a whole bunch of artists on his voyages and many others after him. So one of Captain Cook's artists, William Hodges, is here in the book. Behold the world's first watercolours of icebergs. Doesn't sound that impressive, but it's incredible to think, there's this moment when they're seeing Antarctic icebergs for the very first time. And he's reaching for his watercolours, his fingers are freezing, perhaps his paints are freezing too.
Yeah.
Unless he's capturing an image that his boss, Captain Cook, wants him to set down for posterity.
Now, are there photographs included of the later?
Yeah, there are. I mean, yes, there are some photographs. I'm well known, if I'm well known at all in England, for the photography and exploration books that we make. But of course, as the years progress for these explorers, photography increasingly becomes the means of recording discoveries on expeditions. I think of a man called George Lowe, who was a New Zealand climber. He in fact was one of two New Zealanders on the Everest expedition in 1953, the more famous Ed Hillary, at a time probably the most famous man in the world, the first up Everest. But his best friend George Lowe was a photographer on that expedition, and he later then went on the first crossing of Antarctica as the official photographer. This is in the 50s, and so his journal in the book is filled with sketches too, but also little photographs that he would develop in film in a dark room that he built himself in their hut, carrying his developing fluids in a thermos flask right across the continent. And his journal is filled with little images to remind him of what they've done and to set the sequence of their story for the books they'd have to write when they got home, you know.
Oh, wow. Wow. Well, would you like to read a passage from one of the... Actually, I'd like you to read about your father-in-law.
Hey, this is surprising. Have I got time to pull up the book off the shelf and get it down?
Oh, sure.
Father-in-law, late father-in-law, Sir Wally Herbert, passed away over 10 years ago now. And as I said, he's well known in England, but I guess he really, his achievements have been sort of not ignored so much as his expedition in the 60s was crossing the top of the world, the first to cross the Arctic Ocean with dogs and sledges, is just at the same time when man is looking skyward into space and stepping for the first time on the moon. So Wally's achievements were almost immediately cast into the shadow of that great achievement, the NASA Apollo missions. I've bought myself some time to grab the book. What would you like me to read?
Well, actually, I thought, reading about him might be interesting, but whatever you'd like would be great.
Well, the thing with Wally, and I can read, I open the book, and let me describe what I see, and I can see his journals from actually the 1950s in Antarctica. So he's sketching glaciers that his heroes, Captain Scott and Shackleton and the rest, had travelled up 50 years before him, but not taken the time to chart accurately. And so Wally had the privilege of following in their footsteps. I turn the page again, and it's full of his own drawings of time amongst the ice. He writes that a pioneer has an unspoken responsibility to bring back something of value from his travels, whether it's a map or a discovery, some specialist knowledge perhaps, and contribute to the understanding of our planet. And I think that's a fairly good sort of message for what is an explorer. And there are lots of ways to explore and to discover, and all of these things are still going on now in different ways. But it's all about bringing back some value and understanding. And whether that's, encouraging people to appreciate more of this beautiful planet, or as much as a great scientific discovery, I think that's a fair element of what it means to be an explorer. Can I share a thought with you from an explorer who's not in the book?
Of course.
Because I was speaking to someone earlier today, and it reminded me that today in America is John Muir Day, the 21st of April, the anniversary of his birth. If you don't know John Muir, he's a sort of a pioneer, conservationist, wilderness advocate, an explorer who helped set up some of the first American national parks. A man who really deserved to be in this book, and maybe will be in my next one. But today is his day, and his journals are full of beautiful writing as much as very interesting sketching. And when I travel in the wilderness or travel to the polar regions, I often read some of his work, because I share some of his feelings for our planet, this wonderful world that is big, and one wants to have a good look at it before it gets dark. When the mountains are calling, you must get going. In the wilderness, as he wrote, lies the hope of the world. So this idea that actually explorers and travelling to remote places is good for us as much as good for everyone that we can share these stories with too, and reminds us at every single step, and I would hope at every turn of the page in a book like this, that we're living in a truly wonderful planet, and we shouldn't take that for granted.
That's true.
One of the things I love about the book is that for each explorer, you have a quote from that explorer, and I love reading quotes anyway, but I like some of these a lot. Vivian Fox, there's a real difference.
Fuchs, that's right.
Fuchs. Yeah, there's a real difference between travelers and explorers. Travelers go to places, whereas explorers go to acquire knowledge. They travel for a purpose. Many of these you did include a lot of women explorers. I didn't realize there were so many. How?
I would say not enough. My wife was very good at reminding me at every step we should have as many women as men. But there really are some truly intrepid women. I mean, that should be no surprise to people. But their histories, their stories are often neglected. But many of these women, I think of archaeologists like Adela Breton or Margaret Fontaine or Margaret Mee, who devoted her life to painting beautiful flowers in deep jungles and various things. And these women were not only doing all the tough things that explorers were doing, and then some, but also breaking boundaries in terms of the societies in which they lived, and they were pathfinding in so many ways. So definitely, their stories deserve to be told more widely. I think of it's a rather sad note. Someone like Alexandrine Tinner, who tried to be the first woman to cross the Sahara to get to the source of the Nile too, and her journals have to survive her. She's ambushed on a journey and robbed and essentially left to die in the deserts, and which is obviously awful. But thank goodness her letters and her journals survive her. So her explorations weren't in vain, and the same sort of applies to many of these explorers. This is why they were trying so hard to leave an account of their travels. What they were doing was dangerous, tough, difficult, in very testing circumstances, but they believed strongly in what they were doing, and hoping that those little pictures in their journals and beautiful watercolor paintings that took them so long to achieve would be appreciated by others if they didn't manage to make it home.
Tell us a little bit about Gertrude Bell. I was not familiar with her, and I was amazed at her story.
Yeah, I mean, Gertrude Bell, another sort of one of these wonderful, intrepid explorers. I mean, in the book we just devote a handful of pages, really, to her sketches. She's an archaeologist. She travels to Persia, essentially. She's a climber too, a poet, a writer, a linguist, a political spy, a kingmaker, if you like. She's working at the time, sort of in the run-up to the First World War, when there's a lot of geopolitics going on in the Near East, Middle East, but she's collecting and filling her journals as others might collect butterflies or plants. She's collecting language and making detailed drawings of Syrian architecture or temple floor plans or local heritage and customs, fragments of pottery, all manner of things that catch her eye, and there are many other women like it. Perhaps we should do a book next time just on women travellers. But I think one of the pleasures in me for us in creating this was actually letting women have lots of space alongside all of these other famous British and American explorers that maybe we know so much about. It's quite good that they're all in the same book together, and this alphabetic treatment that you've talked about, gives everyone due space, due time. Yes. Everyone, there's no hierarchy here. Everyone is kind of treated equally. And so it's nice. We jump from inside a tent in a snowstorm to turn the page and join a bunch of crazy Norwegians crossing the Pacific on a balsa wood raft. Turn the page and we're climbing Everest again. Turn the page once more and we're deep in an Egyptian tomb. Turn a page. We're collecting butterflies.
And every page is so beautiful.
It's all there.
So did you do both, and I'm wondering how the division of labor between you and Carrie was in terms of writing, selecting the quotes, laying things out, deciding what pictures to include. Did you split it up by explorer, or did one of you do all the writing and the other did all the layout, or how did you do that?
Oh, it's very much a team effort. We share an office, We share a writing room, and we're publishers as well, so we make the books together.
Wow.
As a historian, I'm kind of more used to gathering and creating exhibitions and working with visuals and art directing, but Kari does the same too. So for a book like this, we'll, after a year or two, whittle down our wish list into something that's manageable, and a few more years of research and curation helps us identify the things that we can photograph and have photographed and be brought into the sort of public domain, if you like. And then we set about the task of writing, and we each wrote about those explorers who, captured our interest. We fought over a few, I suppose. You probably wrote more of the ladies, I probably wrote more of the beardy polar explorers and mountaineers, and then we would help edit each other's work. As for the picture edit, she's not here, so she can't disagree with me. I probably did the lion's share of it. Has a great eye for these kind of things. And then, of course, we work with a great publisher, in fact, a number of publishers. So this book has been published in a bunch of languages in England. It's Thames and Hudson. In America, it's a publisher called Chronicle, who also have a lovely design team. So there's a whole range of talents that make us look much better than we are.
But this was obviously a labor of years.
I would say, you say a labor of love. I mean, books like this,
a labor of love, but that took many years. Yeah.
I would say. I would challenge any author. I don't know any. I know lots of authors. I don't know any that are writing about things that they don't love or find interesting. I can't see the point in devoting many years of your life to writing about stuff that really doesn't capture your interest. And you sort of hope that comes across in the page, and then you celebrate a book that comes out and you move immediately on to the next one.
Well, Huw, I'm sorry I have to cut you off, because this book is wonderful and you're so interesting to talk to, but we're out of time. And I know. And so with your next book, we're going to get you on for a full hour, because we need more time.
It's very kind of you. I would suggest actually you just get my wife on. She'll be far.
Oh, I don't know. Anyway.
So, so thank you very much. And if you're listening, and Mom, do you have some closing words for us today?
Well, I do. This is from the book, actually. It's a quote from Charles Evans, who, of course, was in his Everest journals. And it says, "Many men are happier and find it less strain to fight against wind and wet, cold and fatigue, other than against telephones and timetables."
And if you're ready for an exploration, highly recommend the Explorer's Sketchbook. And see you next week on Writer's Voices.